This is going to be with Kelly Bysouth and Salim Shaikh, and I'll introduce them in a moment. It's going to be a bit of a longer fireside chat than you might have been used to in the past, but don't worry, it's going to be engaging and an opportunity to learn something new from our assembled experts. It's our goal that you walk away from this session in an hour with a newfound inspiration and some ideas you can begin to implement when you return back to your team or your office. But today it's an opportunity to learn from leading professionals who've been at the forefront of supply chain transformations. By listening to them, you will be able to read signposts for how you could improve some of the processes at your own companies and progress your own careers, and to handle some of the more prevalent issues that we're seeing today in our volatile world. By the time we finish today, you will hopefully have learned something about the company International Automotive Components, IAC, who Kelly works for, a leading global supplier of automotive components and systems. You'll learn something about the latest supply chain challenges in the automotive industry, which I'm sure some of you are aware of, but you'll get some confirmation from leaders in this industry. And more importantly, you'll hear some strategies to beat your competition by overcoming these challenges. So please keep your eye on the whole session, because we'll talk about some of these challenges, but towards the end, we'll also cover what you can do to get over them. To make the session interactive, please make good use of the chat field. So we encourage you to ask questions and to ask those questions in the chat field. I'm reliably informed that you will all know how to raise chat, but on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see chat. Please make sure you're in the session tab, right? Because there are a number of different tabs up there, but you need to be in the session tab. Please raise your questions there. We can just have a quick test of that. If you'd just like to put into the chat now the countries that you're based in, and my colleague Charlotte Diener will pull those together and get an idea of the global reach of today's audience. Okay, before we go any further, let me first introduce myself. My name is Simon Bowes. I am the CVP of the EMEA region in Blue Yonder. And through Blue Yonder, I help automotive and aftermarket companies utilize technology and innovation. And they do that to transform their supply chain effectiveness and competitiveness. In these times of uncertainty, there's one thing we can be sure about, and that's that we will always have supply chain disruption, and we all need to prepare our businesses for these disruptions. But with these challenges also comes an opportunity for all of us. And in order to reveal some of these opportunities, today I have pleasure to chat with two leading practitioners in the industry. So first, let me introduce Kelly Bysouth, one of the top 100 women in automotive in North America. Kelly brings 30 years of experience in various supply chain and procurement roles. And she's been leading the supply chain team at IAC, the International Automotive Components Group, for the past 4 years. And it's safe to say she sits on solid supply chain knowledge and experience, most of it derived from the automotive business, where she's worked for most of her career. Kelly is now the Chief Supply Chain Officer at IAC Group, and she has global responsibility and operational control for all aspects of the company's procurement and supply chain activities. Since taking on the role in 2018, Kelly's led an innovative approach to supply chain, and that is driving improvements in visibility, lean inventory management, providing positive cash flow, and all this despite the disrupted supply chain of the last 2 years, including the pandemic months where at times no production at all was taking place. So Kelly's a real industry superstar, and we're very excited that she's willing to share her learnings and thoughts with us here today. Thanks for joining us, Kelly. In a minute, I'll ask you to educate us about IAC and IAC's position in the marketplace. But before that, I'd just like to introduce you to our other expert contributor today. So we're also joined by Salim Shaikh, the Global Vice President of Automotive Industry at Blue Yonder. Salim brings 20 years of supply chain experience, including automotive, and has worked with many of our global automotive customers during his tenure. Salim's established himself as a thought leader, a speaker, and an accomplished author of over 20 publications, including 3 books on the subject of supply chain digital transformation. And additionally, he was recognized by Supply and Demand Chain Executive magazine as one of the supply chain pros to know in 2016. In his role at Blue Yonder, Salim is recognized as a trusted advisor, and he's helping companies to implement best practice strategies and processes to drive their business value and financial benefits. So Salim, thank you for joining us here today. We'll give you a moment in a second. So first of all, I think you'll agree that this is an expert panel. We're in safe hands. So Kelly, thank you for joining us. What I'd really like to know is a bit more about IAC. So can I start by asking you to provide a brief overview of IAC and your role with the company?
Sure, definitely. Thanks, Simon, and thanks for the very nice introduction. I really hope I can live up to the hype. So
I'm sure, I know you can.
I think maybe we're going to pull up a slide. Is that true?
Yeah. Should be a slide coming up.
Give it a second here. Okay. Hi, everybody. So thanks for the opportunity to give a brief introduction about who IAC Group is. So as Simon had mentioned previously, IAC is a leading global supplier of interiors products. So I have, in combination of my time at IAC and my previous time in my former company, John's Controls, I've spent about 25 years in the interiors tier 1 space. So that's definitely my area of expertise within the automotive world. We at IAC, like most major tier 1 suppliers, supply basically all major multinational automotive OEMs. We deliver products and solutions that obviously focus on comfort, value, safety, functionality. We really, that's why I actually really do like the interior space. It's you're really touching and feeling the products that we deliver every day when you get into each of your cars. We are driven by curiosity. Oh, sorry.
Can I just,
yes.
Charlotte, could you just put that slide into presenter mode?
There you go.
Perfect. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem. No problem. We're driven by curiosity to discover new ways to move people forward. That's the type of people we're trying to attract to our company. We really strive to have a diverse and creative community where we can all focus on, new and innovative ways to grow our business and serve our customers. We can move to the next slide. So just a high-level product overview, I would say, in a nutshell, IAC is providing everything on the interior of the vehicle with the exception of seats. So we make instrument panels, cockpits and consoles, door and trim systems, headliner and overhead systems. We also actually have some business on the exterior of the vehicle too, primarily, fascias and molded plastic parts. So really, again, focused on interiors with a small amount of exteriors business in the plastics area. Our core competencies are injection molding, assembly, cut and sew.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Kelly.
Sorry, did you say you wanted to know about my role at IAC?
Yes, please. If you could just give us I mean, that's you're here as a really strong representative and we'd love to know about
Sure,
that. We'll
sure.
ask some more further on about how you got here.
Okay. So my role at IAC, I think you summed it up pretty well. I'm responsible for the operational and strategic aspects of supply chain, and really supply chain, typically in automotive, assumes procurement, logistics management, both operations and procurement, materials, and planning. We're also responsible in my team for sort of the corporate supply chain aspects related to talent development, strategy, key KPIs, working with our facilities to help drive improvement to benchmark performance in the areas of inventory and freight cost.
Great. And I think for all of us, I'm excited that if we get to talk about supply chain issues, which we will, it won't be all centered around semiconductors, just for once.
No.
Which is the normal.
That's the great myth. There's more problems, unfortunately, than just semiconductors.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So before we go any further, Salim, could I ask you to just give us a brief introduction to the role Blue Yonder has in supporting the automotive industry?
No, absolutely, Simon. And again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to this session. First of all, I'd like to thank Kelly for being part of this dialogue, and have had the opportunity to work with Kelly over the last several years at Adient as well, when she led the supply chain transformation at Adient, improving some of the metrics that she highlighted, right? Premium freight reduction, inventory reduction, plant productivity improvements. So yeah, I've known Kelly and interacted with her over the last several years. Now, Simon, on your question on Blue Yonder, Blue Yonder is really a supply chain platform company. And for those of you all who are not aware, we are in the Gartner's Supply Chain Leaders Quadrant, and the only supply chain platform company that is there in the Gartner Supply Chain Leaders Quadrant for all the three underlying supply chain capabilities. And that includes supply chain planning, transportation management, and warehouse management. And we're fortunate to have worked with a lot of our customers, like Adient, where I had the pleasure of working with Kelly, as well as a lot of OEMs like Mercedes-Benz USA, Ford, Toyota, Renault, CNHI, a lot of tier one suppliers like Adient, Cummins Meritor, Yazaki, Bridgestone, Michelin, as well as what we were mentioning, like the high-tech industry and the automotive industry are kind of merging and morphing together. So again, fortunate to have worked with a lot of high-tech semiconductor and consumer electronic companies as well, like Infineon and NXP, Texas Instruments, as well as TSMC and Micron. So customers, again, who've done great things, solved difficult supply chain problems, business challenges, and then spoken publicly about the problems they've solved and the value they have derived. So really fortunate to have worked with a lot of these customers, and that's the reason we have the largest market share as part of the latest ARC report in automotive when it comes to supply chain planning. So that was just a quick introduction about
right. Thanks, Salim. And I see we've got some people from various parts of the world, particularly from North America. So Kelly, I know it was early for you to get up for this, but appreciate everyone joining from New Jersey. I think we've seen, as well as people from Bratislava, UK. Good mix of audience. So thank you all for joining. So going back to you, Kelly. Having experienced leadership at IAC and at Adient, as Salim said, I wonder what opinions you can share with us about the key industry trends that you now see for automotive companies. What do you feel is actually the key trends?
Yeah, that's a pretty broad question. I'm going to try to focus it obviously on kind of the key supply chain trends. So I think as we moved through the last 2.5 years, we really have to have a bigger focus on agility within the automotive space. I would say throughout my whole, very long career in automotive, and whenever I hear it, people talk about it or I see on paper, I think, wow, okay, that's a long time. But the auto industry typically, up until the last, I would say, few years, moves very slow. If you compare it to some of the high tech, companies, we move like a snail's pace. Okay, it's a huge monster. The OEMs typically are not that nimble, and therefore the large tiers are not that nimble either. What we've seen, again, over the last couple of years with all of the craziness that we've experienced, starting with COVID and kind of that tail that came from COVID, we absolutely need to be more nimble and agile to address and deal with change quicker than we have in the past. So I think that's the trend. I mean, you can see some of the OEMs are starting to talk like this. Some of the OEMs want to actually model people like Tesla in the way they design, develop, and launch products. Some of the tiers are talking this way as well. So I would say if I were to pick one, that is the most important developing topic or trend in the auto industry. And it kind of impacts everything, right? From supply chain to engineering development, launch, supply chain, as I mentioned, it kind of rolls on down the line. So agility, adaptability, these things are top of mind right now.
Right, great. Okay, and we will dig a bit further into some of these trends and how we deal with them. Can I ask you, Salim, as a technology provider, I'd be curious to know what you see in the market. I'm sure a lot of that is common with what Kelly talked about, but do you see any other key trends in the industry today?
Yeah, I mean, Simon, as Kelly mentioned, right? Like if I look at the macro industry trend, right, the industry itself is going through a major upheaval, right? As we call, the cars of today are nothing short of data center on wheels, right? Or software-defined vehicles with CPUs, cameras, sensors, a lot of semiconductor content that's going in. And with the trend towards more connected, more autonomous, more electric vehicles, that is going to increase the product complexity even further, right? So on the one hand, you're having this increase in, on the demand side, on the product complexity, where you have to support the ICE platforms, the EV platforms. And then on the other hand, right, on the supply side, we are seeing unprecedented increase in disruptions, right? Whether it's the winter storm in Texas, the NAFTA, COVID, chip shortage, and this is the new normal. So it's kind of a double whammy, both on the product complexity as well as supply disruptions. And I think automotive has been particularly impacted because of the complex nature of the automotive ecosystem, right? Because as Kelly mentioned, you have not just the OEM, you have your dealers, you have your tier 1, tier 2, and even tier N now. And then you have 3PLs, logistics providers, etc. as well. So bottom line, tremendous increase in complexity, supply disruption. And now, again, with inflation at a 40-year high, right, that's having a significant impact on a lot of these tier 1 suppliers, which are kind of getting squeezed between, rising transportation costs and material costs, labor costs on the one hand, and obviously the OEMs, right, changing their demand mix as well, which is having a significant impact on their EBITDA and margin. So
right,
I think with a lot of these, OEMs and tier 1s, they are having initiatives around, working capital reduction, premium freight reduction, bringing their 3PL, 4PL in-house are some of the more, supply chain trends that I'm seeing.
Great. Okay. And you're talking about inflation there. Kelly, I wonder whether, we've always dealt with supply chain issues, all of us, and inflation has an impact on those. But I'm wondering whether the supply chain processes that you are managing, have the priorities changed in there, or have some of the processes been shifted around by inflation? What impact is that having on you?
I would say the priorities probably haven't changed. I mean, in the automotive industry, based on the nature of the industry, the nature of the margin structure, the nature of what I am responsible for as a tier one supply chain leader, that percentage of our selling price is extremely high. So it always has been. Now, obviously, it's higher because of inflation, but those, you know, that cost of sales that kind of the supply chain or procurement team is responsible has always been extremely high in the automotive industry. So the pressure on cost reductions, working capital improvements, as Salim was mentioning, reducing freight costs, reducing inventory costs, that has always been like priority number one. I would say the things that the priorities have shifted for most of the supply chain professionals in the tier one space, and probably at the OEMs as well, we are now more spending more of our time on crisis management, because where in the past, prior to COVID, and we kind of got a little bit spoiled in the auto industry because things were really good for 4 to 5 years, which was kind of unusual. This is a cyclical business. We're usually used to, you know, it's up and down, and there's a more frequency of the up and down than we had seen prior to COVID. So we got a little bit complacent, I think. But we typically in the past weren't really having, once you set up your sourcing pattern, you set up your lane, your freight lane, things pretty much moved on schedule. There was, you know, relatively little disruptions on, you know, availability of materials, relatively little disruption on, oh, my carrier won't move my freight, or they've dropped my lane, or I can't get a ship scheduled, or I have to fly parts via airplane because someone else down the chain didn't have parts to make semiconductor related components, et cetera. So the thing that has changed for us in the last couple of years has been the amount of time we're spending on crisis management versus the other things I talked about. And you could say inflation maybe is playing into that a little bit, but, you know, I think it's more the overall stability of the supply chain that kind of started kind of crumbling a little bit when COVID shut everything down for 3 months. That's really the start of all of this, and it's sort of been a wave from there.
Right. Thank you. Okay, and Salim, I don't know whether you are seeing, you know, I know that as a technology provider, you know, that we are asking our customers to try and support change and transformation. I guess you need some flexibility, right, in the way that you manage the supply chain to take advantage of these changes, because as Kelly said, you know, there's pretty much a constant around the basic processes that we all need, but within those, whether we're trying to run inventory down or take advantage of price, I mean, as inflation is high, do you see companies looking to try and fine tune the way that the processes are running so that they can accommodate the inflationary pressure?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Simon. Means I'll echo what Kelly said, right? Like there is a need for better agility, better speed, better responsiveness, and the way a lot of the OEMs and tier ones were operating, let's say a decade ago, right? Because of all the significant upheaval the industry is going through and all of these supply disruptions, right? They have to change their processes, the governance, the metrics, right? To be able to absorb and be more agile, more responsive, right? To these changes that are happening. I think when I was talking to Kelly, she was mentioning this need for illuminating the supply chain network, and I still remember that, right? Because it's no longer a node that you have to manage, right? It's really getting visibility to that end-to-end network, because there could be mixed changes on the demand side. There could be a Renaissance factory fire, right? Which is a tier 3 supplier for a lot of these OEMs. and you have to get that end-to-end visibility in the supply chain, and not just the visibility to the disruption, but also proactively what risk mitigation plans do you have in place to be able to help address or alleviate those disruptions as well.
Yeah, great. Listen, we're a bit behind time here. I'll try and dig in, but we normally expect this session to be maybe 20-30 minutes. We're going for an hour here. So just before we go for a quick break, can we see if there are any open questions, Charlotte, that have come in that we want to handle now?
We have a comment from Anna Lavera, also insourcing of certain supplier work and parts of the OEMs. Maybe you want to comment on that, and then we'll do a quick poll before we move on.
Okay. So Kelly, do you want to comment on insourcing on supplies? Is that...
Sure. So if the question is, are the OEMs starting to insource more work? I think that's what the question is. I haven't seen it yet. Again, this industry doesn't move very quick. It really doesn't. So and I've seen the cycles of insourcing and outsourcing over my 30 years. It comes and goes, but those decisions are not, again, executed quickly. So just for frame of reference, Johnson Controls back in the day became a major seat supplier because the OEMs decided to outsource seat manufacturing. So for them to make that, there's been back and forth rumblings, and they've chosen to take certain aspects of that back in house. They took the design back in the house, and then they didn't really execute that well. So, and again, all the OEMs are very different, have very different models. So I haven't seen anything in my space yet, or the spaces that I'm, pretty aware of, which is interiors. And I would say if that choice is made, it's something that takes a while to build up that capability, because typically the OEMs, when they outsource something, they get rid of all the knowledge because that's why they're doing it.
Right.
So to bring it back in takes a lot of time to build up. And I would say, from what I understand, most of the OEMs are focused on their EV strategy and not on interiors components, as far as I'm concerned. So a lot of what is being made and what they are choosing to focus on making in-house are related to EV. So it's battery manufacturing, et cetera. So at least in my space, in the traditional ICE components or components that are agnostic to ICE or EV, they're not really focusing on, vertically integrating those at the moment. That's my read.
Okay. Salim, have you in less than 30 seconds, you got anything to add on that?
Yeah, no, I think as Kelly mentioned, I think on the EV side, obviously there is a trend towards more vertical integration, right? Because they have to source not just the batteries, but now I'm hearing the OEMs even going back further upstream, right? And looking at mining, right? Because there are few places in the world where nickel, cobalt, copper, etc. are mined, and everybody wants to secure those sources of material that are really critical, given the industry trend of 50% of the vehicles that are sold by 2030 in North America could be EVs, right? So I think on the EV front, yes, we are seeing a lot of not just vertical integration, but you could call a lot of collaboration and partnerships that are being made, right, between the OEMs and the big battery manufacturers like Panasonic, LG Chem, BYD, SK On, right, with the OEMs like GM, Ford, Stellantis, and then they're trying to obviously secure the upstream supply of those raw materials, which are really critical for the battery manufacturing. But yeah, more so on the EV side relative to, let's say, the seats or the wheels or what have you. Right.
Okay. Look, I'm going to give you all a break, but before you get one, that's not for us, by the way, Kelly and Salim. We don't get the break.
Okay.
But the audience, we're going to give them 5 minutes. But Charlotte, I think we're just going to run a quick poll to get some input from the audience beyond just knowing where they all live. So you should be able to see a poll tab on your screen. If you go to the poll. Can you pull that up, Charlotte, or activate the poll?
I think the poll is active now.
Okay, I'm not seeing that myself, but are you, the rest of you, able to vote?
Can you see the results, Simon? Otherwise, I'll.
I can. Yeah, I see no votes. So, everyone, do you see the poll? Can you pop a question in the queue in the chat if you don't?
Yeah, I can see the results.
Okay.
I think that we'll move on, Simon. We'll move on from there. Yeah.
Okay. How many votes do you see there, Salim?
I see. So I think the question was, what new supply chain issues are you having to manage considering the volatile world we live in? And I think we have votes for supplier collaboration at around 25%, a lack of visibility at around 25%, and then all of the above at around 50%, which includes, supplier green credentials as well as customer prioritization for resolving shortages of supply. So about 50% agree with all four of those trends.
Okay, so and visibility was one of the ones you raised earlier.
Visibility and supplier collaboration are I think top of mind for them.
Great. Okay, thanks for that.
Simon, there is one more question. You might want to save it for the end from Tina Keen.
Okay.
How do you see the solution to ensure the SCM efficiency of raw materials sourced from China, which may be affected by zero COVID policy? So, are you going to answer it now, or do you want to say?
Why don't I think if we're going to give people just 2 minutes to go and grab a coffee, let's do that, and then we'll come back to this. Otherwise, there's no point in having a quick break. Why don't we give people 2 minutes, grab a cup of coffee? Salim and Kelly will hang on here with us, and we'll just chit chat a bit while we wait. But if you could all be back by 20 minutes to the hour, we'll kick off again, and we'll get to that question. Okay. While we wait, everyone's welcome to listen in while we stay here if you haven't gone for a coffee. Kelly, I'm just wondering from your background perspective, I understand that you actually started out studying finance. What made you change tracks and get into procurement and supply chain in automotive? That's quite a shift.
Well, again, I really fell into it, quite frankly. I got out of college with my bachelor's degree in the early 90s, and that the early 90s, at least in the United States, was not an amazing job market. So I had every intention of, getting a cool corporate finance job, and wasn't able to find that readily. So I took a job at a small tier 2 automotive supplier, actually in sales. And I hated that. So I quickly moved into an open purchasing role that they had. And I just ended up really falling in love with it. So I knew nothing about it. I went to Michigan State, which those of you in the United States will probably know that it's the best supply chain management school in the country for years and years and years. But I had friends in that major, didn't know what it was confused by what it was. So again, just fell into it, ended up loving it. So, and have been in it ever since.
Right.
So I think it's a good lesson of, I always tell my kids, it honestly, it doesn't, and it's not that it doesn't matter, but it doesn't really matter what you study in school, because it's just a foundation. And I think actually having a finance degree, I did it because I love numbers. I like solving problems. I'm analytical. And that's why I went into it and got a finance degree. And all of those things play very well into the supply chain role that I have. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about supply chain transformation and using data to make good decisions and wanting to work on projects like I have in the past with Yonder to create that visibility to allow people to get data served up to them so they can make good decisions. So I think it all fits nicely.
Right. And so it's a good way of applying a lot of your knowledge of numbers and finance into changes that happen within the supply chain and making a difference to people's lives, I guess. Right. It's very valuable. We're at the turn. Salim, I'm going to come back to you a little later to find out how a cricket-loving Indian ended up being an expert in the supply chain at Yonder. But I'd like to push on, if that's okay, so that we can make sure that we get some value out of this time. So back to the challenges and the opportunities that we see in the supply chain and the disruption that we see. So I think we're saying that there has been huge disruption, but in managing that disruption, there is opportunity. So Kelly, can you reflect on any of the expected benefits that you're seeing in the transformations that you've delivered at some of your previous companies and at IAC? What are you looking for in terms of the benefit that you're expecting by becoming more advanced and professional?
Yeah. So, and Salim's heard me say this before, it's one of my favorite mantras, never waste a good crisis. So that's how I try to live my professional life. When I started working with Yonder at Adient, it was the same thing. It was obviously prior to any of the craziness over the last couple of years, but we were experiencing some issues within our business that was driving a lot of premium freight, excess inventory, et cetera. So I used that opportunity to try to create change, and that's how we kicked off our supply chain transformation effort. So in the current environment at IAC, same thing, right? COVID and all the aftermaths of COVID has been nothing but one big crisis after another. So same methodology. I'm trying to take baby steps again in this environment to move us forward in getting better visibility in the supply chain and also addressing that agility question, which I kind of put out there initially. The ability to quickly pivot is dependent on how quickly you can get data and assess options. So these are I use every crisis to get something good, and so that's what I'm trying to use the past couple of years with COVID and all the aftermath to start moving our approach forward on getting the right tools in place to deal with those changes more proactively. And again, the outputs are always the same, right? Premium freight, excess inventory, overall potential cost reductions in total cost of ownership. The end results are typically always the same in this space. So same issues we're trying to solve for.
Great. Okay. Salim, anything that Kelly missed there in terms of what the expected benefit of really trying to knuckle down on these issues is?
Yeah, no, I think those are typical kind of benefits that we have seen, similar to what Kelly mentioned at Adient, right? Premium freight reduction, inventory reduction, planner productivity improvements. Of late, just a couple of months ago, we had Cummins Meritor, again, an auto tier one, which has a good aftermarket presence as well, right? Partner with us, and they were able to achieve a 55% improvement in the forecast accuracy. Now, this whole notion of forecasting was, a big change for an auto tier one, which tend to be more like demand takers from the OEM. But I think what Cummins was able to see that, using statistical forecasting, that mid to long term horizon beyond that EDI 830, when the OEMs specifically are changing their demand mix so often, that they were able to leverage that and improve their forecast accuracy. And that led to about a 10% reduction in inventory and $11 million cash flow improvement only in this first year. and not just tier ones, but like we've got customers like Mercedes-Benz, Renault, Mahindra and Mahindra on the aftermarket side as well, who've been able to increase service levels by 10 to 15%, reduce working capital by as much as 20%, and grow business revenue by 10% as well. And beyond just the quantitative benefits, Simon, I think what Kelly mentioned is also the ability to have that longer term visibility, right? For the next 2-year kind of horizon, and moving towards a more connected, synchronized supply chain that can be a lot more nimble and agile and responsive, as opposed to a siloed supply chain where everything is being done at the plant level, right? And then every plant is trying to second guess what the demand is from the next downstream plant, carrying excess inventory, what have you as well. So beyond just the quantitative benefits, I think it provides that end-to-end visibility, increases agility, speed, responsiveness of decision making, looking at a lot of these what if scenarios as well, right? What if my supplier has a disruption, right? What if my plant gets shut down? What impact is it going to have on my OEM demands? How do I allocate that constrained supply to the OEM? So a lot of these what if scenarios also helps planners, right, do more value added activities, as opposed to becoming like Excel jockeys and writing, Kung Fu Excel kind of macros, right? And I think that is really important from a planner and employee retention standpoint as well, where planners, like what they are doing. They have dashboards, they have exceptions, they have what if scenarios, and they can focus more on value added activities like customer collaboration or supplier collaboration.
Thanks. I mean, I think to summarize what you both said, it seems like the metrics aren't changing. It's the same metrics that we've got to manage, but it's almost like a continuous improvement on driving those metrics to be better and better and to be better than your competitor. And that ultimately is what delivers the supply chain transformation. So I just want to shift gears a little bit here, because we're running out of time. The theme of today's Women in Automotive event is very much around driving change, right? And speaking of change, Kelly, you've held leading positions in automotive for 3 decades now. And I'm sure you've seen a landscape change. You've been part of that change. In your experience, do you believe we now have a level playing field with regard to a fully diversified workforce? Are there any areas where you think there is more work to do? I'm sure the audience here today would appreciate a comment from you on that.
Yeah. If I guess I have the luxury of having a very large history in this industry, so I can kind of look at where we are today and compare it to where we were when I came in. And I would say we are so far forward from where I started. But with that said, I guess I didn't really know anything different when I came into the industry right out of school when I was 22 years old. I didn't know anything different. So when I look back and I get kind of different views from different kind of industries and people, I do recognize that automotive was pretty backward when I came into it. It was very male dominated. But with that said, I mean, for me personally, it's made me who I am. So it's kind of, I never have chosen to wallow in the fact that I was the only female executive on the staff, or even earlier on in my career, I was the only female director, I was the only female VP, I was the only, whatever the level I was at. I never really chose to wallow in that at all. I actually chose to try to use it to my advantage, because I always looked at this when I was at Johnson Controls, again, a very large company. It was a $40 billion company, global, huge company. But I would very often go into a room for monthly reviews of 40 people, and there would be 2 women in there. Well, it's much easier to stand out as 2 of 40 versus 38 of the 40. So if you're in an environment where you are outnumbered, male to female, or whatever your diversity status is, if you're, it's race-based, gender-based, whatever, use it as your advantage, to stand out, because trust me, a group of middle-aged white males all kind of saying the same thing aren't really that outstanding in a lot of cases. So a female voice or, another diverse voice is much more impactful in that environment than you may think. So use that to your advantage. That's what I've always tried to do. So definitely automotive, like I said, has come a long way. I personally don't feel that there are any barriers to women to do whatever you want in the automotive industry. I think other industries are even more progressive, but I would never really, I don't feel like there's an issue really that can't be addressed. Everyone's got to make, everyone has to manage their own career though.
Right. Thank you. And what we'll do in a minute, we'll just see if we can get a point of view from the audience as well as to how they see that, how that impacts them, or whether they are experiencing anything different. There is a question here from Tina that I do want to try and cover. How do you see the solution to ensure the supply chain management efficiency of raw materials sourced from China, which may be affected by zero COVID policy? I don't know if that's relevant for you, Kelly. I'm sure that you must have supplies from China, but
yeah.
Have you had to make changes to what you're expecting there?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely the zero COVID policy has had impacts. I would say, fortunately, not massive. We've been able to manage around it pretty well. I mean, I think there are broader in the industry. There have been broader implications for sure. Anytime you shut down massive pieces of a huge economy like China, millions and millions of people are locked up, and there's an impact. I would say usually when that has happened, the Chinese are very creative. They are putting manufacturing in closed looped environments where people are living and working and not leaving, which again, you can have your opinions about the human aspect of that. I guess it's a different discussion, but when it comes to managing these things, they have actually done as well as you could in that environment, like I said. So manufacturing in a lot of cases have been kept open, closed loop environment. Actually, the bigger impact that we've seen is not necessarily making parts or those parts being produced, it's getting them shipped out of China. So if you can imagine, when large parts of the economy are shut down, cities are shut down, people can't go to work at the ports, they can't work at the airports. So that's been a topic for sure. But the actual manufacturing, the Chinese have figured out good ways to get around that by closed loop manufacturing.
And I guess that comes back to your earlier point, Salim, about visibility, right? Because if the factory says, hey, I've done everything I could and it's made.
I mean, visibility, as well as Simon, right, whether it's the COVID lockdown or any of these events that are happening, right? A Brexit, tariffs, etc. I think that I would put it in a bigger, broader umbrella of risk mitigation, right? And how can organization enable supply chain resiliency by revisiting their supply chain network design itself, right? Whether, as opposed to single sourcing critical components from one local supplier in China, whether they are better off reconfiguring their global and regional flows, right, based on cost, service, risk, and this, I'm not just saying onshoring everything, but also looking at proactive risk mitigation strategies like nearshoring or multi-shoring, as opposed to just offshoring or completely onshoring as well.
Right. Okay. And I guess linked to that is, we are very clear, right, and I'm sure that you are around that, the rapid change in technology capabilities, and digital and machine learning is commented all the time. Are there particular areas in the automotive supply chain that you see the best application of those new technologies?
Yeah,
is it visibility, for example?
No, I think if I compare, right, or I draw parallels between, say, supply chain technology and the automotive industry, I think it's going through a similar evolution, right? In the past, when you spoke about supply chain technology, it was more about planners doing a lot of the work, augmented with an APS system or technology. But now, the today and the future is more about, can technology do a lot of the work or automation using machine learning and AI, but then augmented by the planners, right? Very similar to how, if you look at the cars of today, right, you and I were used to the cruise control, right, which was like a level 1 automation, right? Then you had level 2, which is hands off, right, on the car. And then now we are at like eyes off, which is level 3 automation of the automobile. And then finally, the autonomous cars, which are the level 4, right? So I think technology is going through a similar kind of evolution, right? Where it's level 1 was about visibility and where stuff is, and getting visibility from my ERP systems, from my TMS, WMS systems. And then level 2 is more the predictive analytics. Can I predict disruptions before they are going to occur, whether it's a truck getting late because of traffic congestion or port congestion related event. And then level 3 is more about prescriptive analytics around, can technology with cognitive capabilities recommend certain resolution options, whether I should expedite a PO or look at an alternate mode of transportation. And then finally, level 4, which is kind of our nirvana or vision for Blue Yonder, is to enable the autonomous supply chain, where the supply chain becomes self-learning and can, based on past actions and the efficacy of those outcomes, can autonomously act on the planner's behalf, obviously within certain guardrails. So I think it's a journey, Simon, right? It's a walk, run, and sprint kind of journey. You always have to kind of do the walk first before you run and then sprint across those different levels of maturity.
Great. Okay. So, Charlotte, I'm going to be ambitious here. We've only got 3 minutes left. So, what I'd like to do is, could you launch the last poll? But instead of us waiting for the results, I'll make a comment on those right at the very end. But for all of you out there, you again click on the poll tab. I now know where to see the results, so that's a big learning. But if you could poll, in the meantime, I'd like to wrap up now. And first of all, I'd just like to thank Kelly and Salim so much for your insights. As usual, we could have gone on for another hour easily digging here, but I really appreciate your time. It's been very interesting. I think that we've heard a lot about agility, volatility from suppliers and customers, and that's been something that we're having to manage. I think we've also learned that the processes are the processes, but what we need to do is be better at managing those processes, and that's what makes us more competitive. And I think that we've also learned that that the role of females in that process is stronger than it ever has been, and there should be no barriers for you seeing that as a future career and rising to sea levels like Kelly. And I think finally, I loved Kelly's comment about never wasting a good crisis. So good news, everyone. There's a crisis going on. Let's take advantage of it and differentiate ourselves. So with that, there will be you'll see that Charlotte will send you all a link in the chat. Please take a look at that if you want to get a bit more depth. And in the meantime, I'm just going to finally look at the poll that we just did and see if we got any responses.
It's a split audience, Simon. So the question was, is your company's leadership fully behind a diversified workforce to promote innovation and future success? And we've got an equally split vote. Yes is 33% of the vote. Yes, partially, but we have still ways to go is 33%. And yes, but we all still have some work to do in order to attract more women to automotive is 33%. So it's split all across the board.
Right. But no, not yet. That's the good news, right? No, not yet. Got 0.
Yeah.
So look, thanks again, everybody. And thanks, Charlotte, for marshalling us all and pulling all this together. And enjoy the rest of your event for the rest of the day. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.